Good morning. My name is Vanessa Hoffman Elias. I moved to Easton in 8th grade and graduated from Joe Barlow High School in 1989. I've now had the honor of speaking at a number of these award ceremonies over the last few years. And as always, I thank the Joe Barlow administration for taking the time in the rigorous academic schedule for this opportunity to honor Pete's life and reflect on 9/11. Some of you have heard my story before, and some will be hearing it for the first time. Every time I speak, I see life lessons and insights in the short lives that Pete and Sue lived and lost with new eyes. Lives that understood that there was more that connected us than divided us. Rather than just being tolerant, they actually embraced the differences of the other, as that is what makes our world richer. That there is more meaning in life by forging connections with the humans around us, working to weave and not rip the fabric of our communities. Sharing is always painful, but it is my responsibility and gives us the chance to reflect on our history, our humanity, and ask ourselves whether we are conducting our lives in a way that honors all who we have lost. I strive to live a more meaningful life, a life that Pete would approve of, and maybe you will be inspired to do the same. I've had more exposure to terror than most. 21 years ago this Sunday, my husband survived 9/11. My friend and his family were murdered on 9/11. And 6 years ago, my brother survived the terrorist attack at the Brussels airport. I met Peter Burton Hansen, in the halls of Barlow back in 1985. I was a freshman and he was a junior. I would have described him then as a bouncy deadhead with a mop of curly red hair and smelling of a mix of patchouli and smoke from hanging out in the smoking lounge. I say every year, I'm not kidding, we really had one of those. He was so friendly, a straight talker with a great laugh. He had a big heart, a strong sense of fairness, and no problem speaking his mind, especially when standing up for someone. He was like a big brother to me, and he hated my music. Pete grew up outside the US. His life experience gave him a unique understanding and appreciation for the different ways of being and living in the world, and helped make him the special person that he was. He questioned everything, stuck by his convictions, was true to himself, went after his passions, and always tried to lift people up. You could always count on him. He was not only open to different ideas and perspectives, but he embraced them. He would love a debate and understood that underneath it all, we were all humans doing the best we could. We could have opposing views and still be friends. Pete and I kept in touch after graduation. He was at Northeastern and I was at BU. He took me to cool music shows like Thelonious Monk, whose name I always trip on, sketchy and amazing jazz bars, and gave me cassette tapes of happy music because mine were alternative and depressing. My now husband, Eugene, and I continued to hang out with Pete and Sue at their place in Jamaica Plain, and we last saw Pete in San Francisco just 5 months before that September. For me, 9/11 elicits very conflicting emotions, both heartbreak and gratitude. My husband worked on the 64th floor of Tower 2. After a number of frantic, unsuccessful phone calls, I finally got a hold of him, and he explained that it was the other building that had been hit, and he could see papers flying and debris burning, and that they had been told to stay in the building. This was before the time of texting, so I had to hang up with him to call my father-in-law back and let him know that his son was okay. While I was talking with his father, I had the TV on, and I watched as another plane hit the other tower, just about halfway up, which felt like to be around the 64th floor. And I was terrified that my husband was gone. I had no idea who was on that plane. I waited and waited to hear from my husband, and after the longest hour of my life, I finally got his call. He had gotten out and was safe. As he stood at the base of the buildings, he gave me a quick description of the horror, chaos, blood, and the people twirling to their deaths from the burning buildings as he looked on from where he stood. By then, I had a long list of family and friends to call back and update, so we hung up again. A few seconds or maybe minutes later, I watched as his ginormous, indestructible building collapsed. I was once again tortured with no word, thinking he was at the bottom of that pile of rubble and smoke. But finally, after another hour, I was lucky enough to get the call from him that he was okay. He was stuck in the city for the night, as always In and Out were closed, but he was alive. A couple of hours later, the very same day on September 11th, I got a package from our friends Pete and Sue. It was a baby gift for our 6-week-old baby girl. I wouldn't open it because I wanted my husband there with me, so I waited until Eugene got home the next day. We opened up the package and the sweet card, still having no idea. We didn't have cable and most of the TV stations were out because of the tower's collapse. We had only reception for just one channel from New York or New Jersey, but eventually turned it off. It was simply too much to bear to see all the photos, signs, candles, and desperate attempts of people trying to find their loved ones. It wasn't until a few days later, after we had escaped to Vermont, when I got a phone call from my mom. Vanessa, honey, I have to tell you something. You knew someone on that plane. It was Pete, his wife, and little Christine. My own scream still haunts me. The plane that had hit my husband's building was carrying Pete, Sue, and little Christine. For those of us who lived through 9/11, it's not just a news clip, a page in a history book, or a special on TV. It was a pivotal day in our lives, in the world, a marker in time of pre and post 9/11 life. Most of you weren't even born yet, but I hope that by hearing about Pete and his little family and my story, that you can know and remember. This Sunday marks 21 years that our realities were dramatically and traumatically changed. We felt like our world was ending. At points over the last 2.5 years, many of us, many of you, have felt that too. There is an old saying that says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Although I'm not a huge fan of that saying, it does have a point. When we go through dark times and come out on the other side, we learn that we can do hard things and be okay. And not only be okay, but stronger and a new perspective. Even more important than strength, though, is having hope. The most important ingredient of resilience is hope. As children and teens, it is hard, even impossible for you to have this perspective, but look to the adults in your lives to know for it to be true. And to all the adults here, this is our charge, to acknowledge and validate the pain and give perspective for hope. I call it living out loud authentically, so that our kids know we don't have it all figured out, and that we struggle too, and we find ways through. You can, we can, and will get through the moments of pain and struggle. It won't always feel like this. Eventually, it will be a memory. There is a future after this moment of pain. This is resilience. We are nothing and nowhere without hope. And hope is a choice that we can and must make. As this is National Suicide Prevention Week, I reflect that the terrorists took my friends, their 2-year-old, and 3,000 innocent souls that aren't the only terrorists that take those we love way too soon. So many in our world are struggling. Our mental health is suffering. Eating disorders, addiction, overdose deaths, and suicide are all on the rise. These are internal terrorists that we must help our loved ones and our community fight daily. Never give up on the people suffering. They need you, and they need your hope. And if you are suffering, reach out. You matter, and there is help. Pete's mom, Eunice Marguerite, as I like to call her, always says that after the attacks, she found strength and hope in our nation's unity, solidarity, and togetherness. People and communities came together, volunteered. Many paid the ultimate sacrifice as they combed through the rubble for days and weeks on end. The days, weeks, and months just after 9/11 sometimes feel like they are being romanticized, but it was real. My lesson from 21 years ago is that the only way through it is together. Our connection with each other is what makes us stronger. Pete was only wrong about one thing in my mind. In his emails to me in the weeks prior to 9/11, we were trying to set up a time when we could get together. I could finally meet little Christine, and he could meet my Chloe. And he said, "Settle in, you're a new mom, don't worry, we'll have time." We never got the time. This week, I learned of a new book that's becoming a bestseller in England entitled How to Live When You Could Be Dead. The purpose is not to raise anxiety about risk or be reckless, but rather an opportunity to live intentionally. The message is instead to make the most of every day. It's so hard to see when you were in it, but step back and know that life is for living. My story and Pete will never change. We will never have a chance to have more stories or make more memories. Age is a privilege that not all of us get. Don't take your time for granted. Don't wait to live. Find connection and know there is always hope.